The hospice called me at 4:17 in the morning to tell me my grandmother was gone. I remember the exact time because I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table in my apartment in Allentown, staring at a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. The nurse on the line was kind, professional, rehearsed. She used the phrase, "passed peacefully," and I thanked her the way you thank someone who has just rearranged the geography of your life. Then I hung up, and I sat there until the sun came up, listening to a refrigerator hum in a city pretending nothing had changed. My name is Daniel Reyes. I'm 31 years old. I worked as a freight dispatcher for a logistics company that moved produce up and down I-78. My grandmother, Inez Reyes, raised me from the age of 9 after my mother decided motherhood was a costume she could take off. Inez was the kind of woman who kept a rosary in one pocket and a folding knife in the other, who watched the news with her arms crossed and muttered in Spanish at every politician on screen. She had been declining for months. Lung cancer, the kind that doesn't negotiate. So the call wasn't a surprise. The silence after it was. I drove to her apartment in Bethlehem that morning to begin the paperwork, the calls, the impossible arithmetic of grief. Her place still smelled like the cinnamon candles she lit on Sundays. I sat on her couch and tried to remember how to breathe in a room without her in it. At 10:43 that same morning, my phone rang. The screen said Abuela. I looked at it for a long time before I answered, because I knew, the way you know your own pulse, that there was no one alive on the other end of that line. "Hello?" I said. Static. Not the soft static of a bad connection, something layered, wet, like a crowd whispering through a wall. "Danny." Her voice, unmistakable, thinner than I remembered, but hers. "Danny, listen to me. Listen carefully. I don't have much time, and neither do you." I couldn't speak. My throat had closed around every word it had ever known. "They told you I was gone at 4. I was not gone at 4. I went somewhere else for a little while. I saw things, Danny. I saw what's coming, and it is already here. You need to leave the city. Today. Before sundown. Take the back roads. Don't go on the highway. The highway is where they will be first." "Abuela," I finally said, and my voice cracked into 3 pieces. "Abuela, this isn't possible." I know it isn't. And still I am telling you. Get Marisol, get Tomas. Get to the cabin in Hickory Run, the one with the green door. Don't trust the radio. Don't trust the soldiers. Don't trust anyone who tells you it's contained. Contained? Abuela, what's contained? What are you talking about? There was a pause, and inside that pause, I heard something move behind her voice. A long, low sound, like wind through a throat that had forgotten what throats were for. "They're waking up, Danny. The ones who shouldn't. I have to go now. I love you. I have always loved you. Run." The line went dead. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear for what might have been a minute or an hour, and I told myself, calmly and reasonably, that grief does things to people. That I had imagined it, that I had dreamed it while awake. I almost believed it. I almost laid back on her couch and let the silence swallow the call whole. Then I turned on the television, because I needed a normal voice in the room, any normal voice, to anchor me back to the world. The anchor on the morning news was not reading the weather. She was reading evacuation routes. Her hands were shaking. The chyron at the bottom of the screen said, "Respiratory outbreak. Philadelphia Metro shelter in place advised." The anchor's name was Karen something. She kept losing her place. She kept glancing off camera at a producer who, judging by the angle of her eyes, was no longer standing where producers usually stand. She said the word biting once, very fast, and then corrected herself and said, altercations. She said hospitals in Philadelphia, Camden, and Trenton were overwhelmed. She said the National Guard had been mobilized. She said do not, under any circumstances, approach anyone exhibiting symptoms. She didn't say what the symptoms were. I muted the television and called my sister Marisol. She picked up on the second ring, which was the first miracle of that morning. Marisol is 26, a pediatric nurse at St. Luke's, and the only person in my family who has ever been able to out-argue our grandmother. Her voice when she answered was tight, low, the voice she used in the trauma bay. Danny, where are you? At Abuela's. Marisol, listen. Something is... I know. I'm at the hospital. We've been on lockdown since 6. Danny, listen to me very carefully. Do not come here. Do not come anywhere near here. There are people in the ER who are not behaving like patients. Security shot one of them, and he got back up. He got back up, Danny. The world tilted, very gently, like a tray sliding off a table. Marisol, Abuela called me. What? 20 minutes ago, Abuela called me. She told me to come get you. She told me to get Tomas. And go to the cabin in Hickory Run, the one with the green door. There was a long silence on the line. Marisol is not a woman who believes in ghosts. She believes in vital signs and dosages and the way a body fails in order. When she finally spoke, her voice had a quality I had never heard in it before, a kind of held-breath stillness. Danny, Abuela died at 3:58 this morning. I was there. I was holding her hand. I know. Then who called you? I don't know. But she said the same things you're saying. She said don't trust the radio. She said don't trust anyone who says it's contained. Marisol, I need you to get out of that hospital. I heard her breathing. I heard, in the background, somebody screaming a name over and over. And then the scream stopped in a way screams aren't supposed to stop. There's a service exit by the loading dock, she said. I can get to my car. Give me 40 minutes. I'll meet you at Thomas's school. Thomas is Marisol's son. He's 9. He has my grandmother's eyes and my dead grandfather's stubbornness and a smile that has, more than once, talked me out of bad decisions. He was, at that moment, sitting in a 3rd-grade classroom at Sacred Heart Elementary, almost certainly drawing dinosaurs in the margin of a math worksheet, while the city around him began to come apart. I grabbed 3 things from my grandmother's apartment before I left. Her folding knife, the one she kept in her right pocket. A small wooden cross she had hung above her bed since I was a child. And a Tupperware container of a rose con polo from her refrigerator, because some instincts are older than fear. I locked her door behind me. I stood in the hallway for a moment, and I said out loud, "Thank you, Abuela." Then I went down the stairs 2 at a time. Outside, the morning had the wrong color. Not dark, exactly. Yellow. Smoke yellow. The way the sky looks in late summer when something is burning a state away. There were too many sirens. There were not enough cars on the road for a Tuesday. A woman across the street was loading suitcases into a minivan at a speed that suggested she had stopped caring whether they were the right ones. I got into my truck. I put the knife in the cup holder. I drove toward my nephew. And I did not turn on the radio, because Abuela had told me not to. And because some part of me was beginning to understand that she had not been wrong about anything in her life and was not about to start now. Sacred Heart Elementary sits on the corner of 4th and Wyandotte, behind a wrought iron fence that was installed in 1962, and looks like it has been waiting for something its entire life. When I pulled up, the parking lot was already half full of idling cars, and parents were moving toward the front doors in that particular walk that isn't quite a run. The walk of people who have decided to be polite about an emergency. The principal, a small Filipino woman named Mrs. Aquino, was standing in the doorway with a clipboard, releasing children one at a time, refusing to be rushed. I loved her for that. I still do. I gave her my name. I gave her Tomas's name. I gave her the secret word Marisol had set up at the beginning of the school year, which was Tortuga. Mrs. Aquino checked her clipboard, looked at my face, and nodded once. A minute later, Tomas came running down the hallway with his backpack bouncing and his shoelaces untied and his eyes too big for what was happening. "Tio Danny, why is everybody picking up?" "Because we're going on a trip, mijo. A surprise trip. To the cabin." "With Mom?" "With Mom. She's meeting us." He accepted this the way kids accept the lies adults tell them when the truth is too heavy to carry yet. He held my hand on the way to the truck, which he hadn't done in 2 years. I noticed because I noticed everything suddenly. The way a crow on the fence didn't fly off when we passed. The way a man across the street was standing very still in his own driveway with his back to us, swaying slightly, as if listening to music no one else could hear. The way the air smelled faintly of copper. The way it does before a thunderstorm, except the sky was empty. Marisol pulled in 9 minutes later. She still had her scrubs on. There was blood on the right sleeve, and she saw me see it. And she shook her head once, which meant, "Don't ask, not now, not in front of him." She got out of her car carrying a duffel bag and a hard plastic case I recognized as the one she used for emergency medical supplies. She hugged Thomas like she was checking that he was still made of bones. "We take my truck," I said. "More clearance, better on the back roads." "Agreed." We transferred her things in under a minute. I was throwing her duffel into the back seat when I heard the first scream of my life that I knew, instantly and without translation, was not a human sound. It came from the direction of the school, high, wet, wrong in its rhythm. I turned, and Mrs. Aquino was no longer standing in the doorway. The doorway was empty. The clipboard was on the ground. "Get in," Marisol said, very quietly. "Get in, Danny. Now." I got in. I locked the doors. Tomas was in the back, buckled, holding the wooden cross from my grandmother's wall, which I had absent-mindedly put on the dashboard and which he had absent-mindedly taken. He was looking at it like it might answer a question he hadn't yet learned how to ask. I pulled out of the parking lot. In the rearview mirror, I saw a small figure stumble out of the school's front doors. A child, maybe Thomas's age, in a yellow raincoat. The child was running, but not toward the cars. The child was running at a parent, and the parent opened their arms. And then the parent did not close them again, because the child had already done something with their mouth that parents are not supposed to survive. I did not slow down. I did not stop. Marisol put her hand on my forearm and squeezed once, hard. And I understood that she had seen it too, and that we had just made the first of many decisions we would never be able to take back. "Back roads," she said. "Back roads," I agreed. We drove north, away from the city, into a morning that had stopped pretending to be morning. And behind us, the sound of Allentown beginning to forget itself rose up like a tide that had been waiting a long time to come in. The first hour outside the city was quiet in a way that frightened me more than the noise had. We took Route 248 north toward the Poconos, the road my grandmother had driven me up every summer of my childhood, to a green-doored cabin she had bought with my grandfather in 1978 for the price of a used car and a promise. The asphalt was nearly empty. We passed a state trooper parked sideways across both southbound lanes, lights flashing, no trooper in sight. We passed a gas station whose pumps were running with no one holding the handles, fuel pooling on the concrete in a slow silver lake. We passed a dog, a beagle, trotting down the shoulder with a leash still attached to its collar and no one on the other end of it. Tomas had fallen asleep against the door, the way children do when the body decides that consciousness is no longer a survivable state. Marisol watched him in the side mirror for a long time before she spoke. "He's going to ask," she said, "sooner or later, about what he saw. I know. I don't know what to tell him. The truth eventually, as much as he can hold." She nodded. She picked at the dried blood on her sleeve with her thumbnail. I waited, because I had learned, growing up in a house with two strong women, that some sentences need to walk a long way before they reach the door. "It started Sunday night," she said. "We thought it was a bad flu season. People came in with fevers, confusion. By Monday afternoon, we had 3 of them restrained because they were biting. By Monday night, the restraints weren't enough. The CDC pulled into the parking lot at midnight and never came inside, just sat there in a van. This morning, around 5, a man in the ICU stopped breathing, was pronounced, and got up off the gurney 20 minutes later. He killed the doctor who pronounced him. He killed a nurse I had trained with for 6 years. Her name was Priya. She had a daughter Thomas's age." She said all of this without inflection, the way you read aloud from a page you do not believe in. "I'm sorry, Marisol. I know. Abuela called me at 10:43. Her voice, her words. I'm not crazy. I didn't say you were crazy, Danny. You're a nurse. You're a scientist." She looked at me for a long moment. "I'm a nurse who watched a corpse sit up and chew through a colleague's throat this morning. I'm done deciding what's impossible." We drove in silence for a while after that. The road climbed. The trees thickened. We saw the mountains begin to gather themselves on the horizon, blue and patient and indifferent. For the first time since the phone call, I felt the muscles in my shoulders loosen a fraction of an inch. Then we came around a bend near Laheighton and the road was gone. Not gone exactly. Occupied. A tractor-trailer had jackknifed across both lanes, and behind it, a small accordion of cars had crumpled into each other like an argument no one wanted to finish. People were out of their vehicles. Most of them were standing in the way people stand when they are trying to decide whether to help or run. A few of them were not standing at all. A few of them were on the ground, and a few of them were on top of the ones on the ground. And the sounds carrying across the asphalt were not the sounds of people helping. I stopped the truck 100 yards back. I killed the engine. Marisol's hand went to the door handle, and I caught her wrist. "No," I said. "Danny, there are people. Look at them. Marisol, look." She looked. I watched her face do the small, terrible math. I watched her see what I had seen. The way some of the figures moved in jerks, the way their heads canted at angles necks were not designed for. The way they did not seem to notice the rain that had begun to fall in fat warning drops on the windshield. Tomas stirred in the back seat. "Mom, why'd we stop?" "Just a traffic thing, baby. We're turning around." I put the truck in reverse. Slowly, very slowly. The figures on the road had not yet noticed us. The rain was a gift. I backed up 200 feet before I turned, 3-point, into the opposite lane, and even that small maneuver felt like the loudest sound in the world. We took the next side road we found. It was unmarked. It went the wrong direction. I took it anyway. The side road wound through farmland that was already beginning to look abandoned in a way farmland shouldn't. Fields uncut, gates open, cattle standing in clusters with their heads pointed towards something we couldn't see. We passed a farmhouse where someone had spray-painted the word "inside" in red across the front door. And I could not tell if it was a plea or a warning, Marisol pulled out a paper road atlas from my glove compartment, the one I kept for fun, for nostalgia, for the joke of being the only millennial dispatcher who still believed in maps. It stopped being a joke that afternoon. We were going to need every page of it. If we go up through Palmerton and cut east on the old quarry road, we can avoid the turnpike entirely, she said. It adds 2 hours, maybe 3. Better 3 hours than 3 minutes. Agreed. Tomas was awake now, fully watching the world go by his window with the particular attention children pay to things adults are trying not to explain. He had not let go of the wooden cross. He held it the way I had seen my grandmother hold it during thunderstorms, lightly, between thumb and forefinger, more habit than faith. "Tio Dani," he said. "Is it the end of the world?" I looked at Marisol. She looked at me. Neither of us had been issued a script for this. "No, mijo," I said. "It's the end of something, but not the world. The world keeps going. We're going to keep going with it." He thought about that for a while. "Did Abuela know?" The truck almost drifted off the road. "What do you mean, did Abuela know?" "She told me at the hospital, last week. She said something bad was coming, and I had to be brave, and I had to listen to Mom and you. She said she'd find a way to tell you when it was time." Marisol had gone very still in the passenger seat. I could feel her looking at the side of my face. I kept my eyes on the road, because if I looked at her, I was going to have to stop the truck. And we couldn't stop the truck. Not here, not now, not ever again until we reached the cabin. "She told you that?" I said carefully. "Yeah. She said don't be scared when weird stuff happens. She said weird stuff is just God taking the long way around." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was the first sound of joy I had made all day, and it came out cracked and broken and grateful, because that was Abuela, all the way through, even from wherever she was now. God taking the long way around. She'd been saying that since I was 6 years old and lost my first tooth in a bowl of cereal. "She was right, mijo," I said. She was right. We drove for another hour. The rain stopped. The sun came out, weak and apologetic, between gray cloud banks. We crossed a one-lane bridge over a creek I had fished in as a boy, and on the far side of it, leaning against a guardrail, was a man. He was alive. I could tell from 100 yards. The infected, even at distance, had a wrongness to their posture, a refusal of gravity. This man was simply tired. He was maybe 50, white, gray-bearded, in a hunting jacket. He was holding a hunting rifle, barrel down, and he raised his free hand as we approached, palm out, the universal gesture for please. "Don't stop," Marisol said. "He has a gun." "That's why don't stop." I slowed anyway. I don't know why. Maybe because my grandmother had also said, more than once, that the world ends faster when you stop helping strangers. I rolled my window down a crack as we crawled past, the truck still moving, ready to gun it. "Where you headed?" the man called. "North. Don't go through Palmerton. The bridge over the Lehigh is blocked. National Guard turned. They're shooting anyone who tries to cross." "Shooting? Shooting!" He spat into the road. "Take the quarry road east, then cut up through Beltsville. That's clear. For now." "Why are you telling me this?" He looked at Thomas through the back window. Thomas looked back at him, solemn, the cross still in his hand. "Because I had a grandson," the man said. "And nobody told me anything." I nodded. I rolled the window back up. I drove on. In the rear-view mirror, the man with the rifle watched us go until the road bent and erased him. and I have thought about him almost every day since, and I've never learned his name. We reached the cabin at 6:34 in the evening, with the sun bleeding red through the pines and a quarter tank of gas left in the truck. The green door was exactly where my grandmother had left it, faded a little more than I remembered, the paint flaking around the brass knob. The key was where she had always kept it, under the third stone of the walkway, the one shaped vaguely like a kidney. I lifted the stone. The key was there. So was a folded piece of paper, sealed in a plastic sandwich bag, with my name on it in her handwriting. I stood up too fast. The blood left my head. Marisol caught my elbow. "Danny, what is it?" I showed her the bag. She read my name on it. She looked at me, and her face did something I'd only seen it do twice before in our lives. Once when our mother left, and once when our grandfather died. A small, involuntary collapse around the eyes. "How long has that been there?" she whispered. "I don't know." "Open it inside, not here. Inside." We got Thomas into the cabin first. We checked every room with the trooper-grade flashlight Marisol kept in her duffel. Closets, under beds, the crawl space, the loft. It was empty. It smelled like dust and old wood smoke and the lavender sachets my grandmother had tucked into every drawer in 1991 and never removed. The pantry was stocked. The well pump worked. The propane tank, when I checked the gauge, read 3/4 full. She had been preparing this place. For how long, I couldn't guess. I sat Tomas at the kitchen table with a Tupperware of arroz con pollo I had taken from her refrigerator that morning, which had survived the day in a small miracle of insulation. He ate it cold with a spoon the way he liked it. He ate 3 helpings. Then he put his head down on his arms and fell asleep at the table, and Marisol carried him to the small back bedroom that had been mine when I was his age. And she tucked him under the quilt my grandmother had stitched the year I was born. When she came back to the kitchen, I had the plastic bag on the table between us, unopened, and a bottle of my grandfather's old bourbon from the cabinet above the sink, and 2 coffee mugs, because there were no clean glasses, and we were past the point of caring. I opened the bag. I unfolded the paper, my grandmother's handwriting. The slow, careful cursive she had learned in a one-room schoolhouse in Ponce in 1947 filled both sides. "Danny, if you were reading this, then I was right. And I am sorry. I have been seeing things in dreams since the spring. I did not tell you because I did not want you to think your old grandmother was finally losing her mind. Although I have lost it many times before and always found my way back. The dreams were of a sickness that wakes the dead. The dreams were of you and Marisol and Thomas on a road. The dreams were always of this cabin, with the door closed and the lights low. I have been stocking the pantry since June. The rifle is under the floorboards in the loft, 3rd board from the window, with 2 boxes of ammunition. There is a radio in the cellar that runs on batteries and a hand crank. There is a map I drew of the back trails to Lake Harmony, in case you must leave on foot. There is enough food for 3 people for 4 months, if you're careful. I do not know if I will be able to speak to you after. I have asked God for the favor. He has not yet answered, but he is often slow. If I do speak to you, do not be afraid. It will still be me. I will always be me. Take care of your sister. She will pretend she is taking care of you. Let her, when she needs to. Take care of Tomas. He is the best of all of us. Take care of yourself, mijo. You were the great surprise of my life. Te amo, abuela. I put the letter down. I did not cry. Marisol did. She cried without sound, the way nurses learn to cry, the tears running and her face not moving. I poured the bourbon. We drank. Outside, the wind moved through the pines, and somewhere a long way off, A single gunshot rang out, and then the woods were silent again, and we sat in my grandmother's kitchen, in her chairs, under her roof. And we began, slowly, to understand that we were going to live, for now, because she had decided, months ago, that we would. The first 3 days at the cabin passed in the strange suspended way that the first days after a catastrophe always pass, where the body insists on small routines because the mind cannot yet hold the large ones. We pumped water. We boiled water. We inventoried the pantry. Marisol cataloged the medical kit on the kitchen table like she was setting up a triage station, which I suppose she was. I went up into the loft and pried up the 3rd floorboard from the window and found the rifle exactly where my grandmother had said it would be. Wrapped in oilcloth, a Marlin lever-action .30-30 that had belonged to my grandfather, with 2 cardboard boxes of ammunition beside it and a small note in her handwriting that said simply, "Aim low. They go down." I had fired the rifle exactly twice in my life, both times at tin cans, both times badly, the summer I turned 14. I cleaned it that first night by the light of a kerosene lamp, the way my grandfather had taught me, and the smell of the oil and the metal brought him back into the room more completely than any photograph ever had. I sat with him for a long time. I told him, under my breath, that I would try. That was all I could promise. Tomas adjusted faster than either of us expected. Children are built for the present tense in a way adults forget how to be. He found my old comic books in a trunk in the loft. He took over the small back porch as his fort. He named the chipmunks who lived under the woodpile, all 4 of them, and they were called, in order of appearance, Captain, Biscuit, Doña Rosa, and Greg. He asked about his father exactly once, on the 2nd night, and Marisol told him the truth, which was that his father had been in Seattle on a business trip when the news started, and that we did not know, and that not knowing was not the same as bad news, and that he could keep hoping for as long as he needed to. Tomas nodded. He went back to his comics. That night, I heard him praying in the back bedroom, very softly, in the Spanish my grandmother had taught him, and I stood in the hallway and I did not interrupt. The radio in the cellar worked. We listened to it twice a day, morning and evening, for 15 minutes at a time, to save the batteries. The first day we tuned in, every commercial station was dead air or emergency broadcast loops. By the 2nd day, the emergency loops had stopped updating, which somehow felt worse. On the 3rd day, Marisol found an amateur shortwave channel on 7.262 megahertz, where a woman in Scranton was reading names. Names of the alive, names of the confirmed dead, names of the missing. She read for 2 hours every evening, in a voice that never broke, and people called in with more names, and she read those too. I did not know her. I loved her completely. On the 4th day, we heard our grandmother's name on the list of the confirmed dead. Marisol and I looked at each other across the cellar. We did not speak. We turned off the radio. We went upstairs. We made dinner. We did not put the radio back on for 2 days. The infected, we learned slowly, were not what the movies had taught us to expect. They did not run, mostly. They walked in a loose, drifting way, as if half remembering an errand. They were drawn to sound more than sight, and to fire not at all, which made the kerosene lamps a small mercy. They did not gather in herds so much as accumulate in places where there had been people, the way leaves gather in corners. They could be killed by destroying the brain. They could also be killed, more slowly, by destroying enough of the body that the body simply ran out of ways to move. Marisol theorized, on the 5th night over bourbon, that the contagion was fungal rather than viral. Based on the pale filament-like growths she had glimpsed at the back of one infected throat in the ER. I asked her how she had glimpsed that. She did not answer. We saw our first infected at the cabin on the 6th day. It came up the dirt road in the late afternoon, alone. A man in a UPS uniform with one arm hanging wrong. I watched it from the loft window through the rifle's iron sights for 3 full minutes before I decided whether to fire. In the end, I did not. It drifted past the cabin without turning its head, as if our small green door had become invisible and disappeared into the trees on the far side of the meadow. I lowered the rifle. My hands shook for an hour. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother. She was sitting on the porch in her rocker. She did not speak. She only nodded at me, once, the way she used to nod when I had done something difficult and done it right. I woke up at dawn with the taste of cinnamon in my mouth and the clear, calm sense that we were not, despite all evidence, entirely alone. We were not alone in another sense either. And we learned it on the 9th day, when the smoke appeared. I was splitting wood behind the cabin when I smelled it. Not wood smoke, tire smoke, the acrid chemical smoke of something not meant to burn. I climbed up to the loft and looked out the south window with the binoculars my grandmother had left in a drawer. About 2 miles down the valley, through a gap in the pines, I could see a thin black column rising from what I thought was the old Mennonite farm at the bottom of the road. The column was steady, controlled. Someone was burning something on purpose. I came down. I told Marisol. She thought about it for a long time, slicing potatoes at the kitchen table, the knife moving in the patient rhythm she had learned in a hospital kitchen at 17. People, she said finally. Probably. Could be good, could be bad. Could be both, usually is. She set the knife down. We need to know, Danny. If they're 2 miles away, they'll find us eventually. Better we find them first, on our terms, with the rifle. You want me to go. I want us to decide, together. But yes, I want you to go, tomorrow morning, with the rifle. You stay in the trees, you look, you come back. You don't make contact unless you have to. I nodded. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in the loft, listening to the wind, and I thought about the man with the hunting rifle at the bridge, and how he had told us about the road because he had a grandson once. And I thought about how the world, even now, even like this, was still being held together by small acts of stranger kindness, and how that fact was the only theology I had left. I left at dawn the next morning. I took the rifle, 6 rounds, a canteen, a sandwich, and the wooden cross from the dashboard, which Thomas had pressed into my palm at the door without saying anything. I went down the back trail my grandmother had marked on her map, which followed the ridge above the road and gave a clear view of the valley. The morning was cold. The leaves were beginning to turn. The world had not received the memo that it was supposed to be ending. It was, with mechanical loyalty, becoming autumn. I reached a vantage point above the Mennonite farm by mid-morning. I lay flat in a stand of mountain laurel and watched through the binoculars for an hour. There were people, 7 of them that I could count. 3 men, 3 women, a teenage girl. They were burning a pile of clothing in a metal drum in the yard. They were also, I saw, building something. A long, low fence of woven wire and sharpened stakes, the kind of fence you build to slow down something that walks but doesn't think. They moved with a coordinated economy of people who had already lost arguments about who was in charge and accepted the outcome. They were armed, but the weapons were slung, not held. They were laughing at something once. A woman was hanging laundry. It looked, from a distance, like a life. A small, hard, deliberate life, but a life. I watched until noon. I was about to turn around and go home when I heard the snap of a branch behind me, very close, and the cold press of metal at the base of my skull. And a voice that said, very calmly, "Don't move, don't turn around. Tell me your name, and tell me why you're watching my family." I did not move. I did not turn around. I held very still, and I thought, with a clarity that surprised me, that my grandmother had been right about everything, including this, and that I was about to find out whether the world still had any kindness left in it, or whether I had used up the last of my allotment at a bridge in Lehighton. "My name is Daniel Reyes," I said. "I'm watching because I have a sister and a nephew in a cabin 2 miles north of here. And I needed to know if you were the kind of people we should be afraid of." There was a long silence. Then the metal lifted off my skull. "Stand up, Daniel Reyes," the voice said. "Slowly, leave the rifle. Let's go meet my family. Then we'll decide together what kind of people any of us are." His name was Aaron Yoder. He was 44, lean and weathered, with the kind of stillness in him that comes from a life lived close to animals and weather. He had been a dairy farmer before. He was still a dairy farmer, technically, except that most of his herd was dead and the rest were loose in the back 40, and he had bigger problems than milk. He walked me down the ridge with my unloaded rifle slung over his own shoulder and my 6 rounds in his pocket. And he did not point his weapon at me again. But he did not give my weapon back either. And I respected the precision of that. The people at the farm did not shoot me when I arrived, which I counted as a successful first meeting. Aaron's wife was named Ruth. She was a small, sharp-eyed woman who had been a midwife and a schoolteacher, and I gathered quickly the actual final authority in any disagreement that mattered. There was a younger couple, Daniel and Hannah, no relation to me, who had been visiting from Lancaster when the roads closed. There was an older man named Samuel, Aaron's uncle, who had not spoken in 3 years for reasons no one explained to me. There was a black woman in her 30s named Renee, a veterinarian from Bethlehem who had stopped at the farm for gas on day 2 and never left. And there was the teenage girl, Aaron and Ruth's daughter, 15 years old, named Esther, who looked at me with the open, suspicious appraisal of a person who has already decided that the adults around her are doing their best and that their best is not necessarily going to be enough. Ruth fed me bread and goat's milk at a long wooden table in the kitchen. She asked me 3 questions. Where had I come from? Who was with me? What did I have to trade? I answered honestly. I told her about the cabin. I told her about Marisol and Tomas. I told her about the rifle and the pantry and the radio and the well. I did not tell her about my grandmother's phone call. I was not ready to share that with strangers, and I was not sure I ever would be. Ruth listened. She nodded once when I was done. She looked at Aaron. Aaron looked at her. Some entire conversation passed between them in under a second. The kind of conversation that takes married people 20 years to learn how to have. "We have a problem," Ruth said to me, "and you might be part of its solution, or its complication. We'll find out." The problem was this. A group of men, 6 of them, had come down the valley road 3 days ago in 2 pickup trucks. They had asked for food. Aaron had given them food. They had asked for fuel. Aaron had given them some of his fuel. They had asked for Esther. Aaron had told them no. They had left. They had said they would be back. "When?" I asked. "Tomorrow," Ruth said. "Maybe the day after. Not longer than that." They didn't strike me as patient men. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the cabin. I thought about Marisol's face when I told her. I thought about my grandmother's letter. and the line about how the world ends faster when you stop helping strangers. I thought about the unbuilt half of the fence in the yard, and the fact that 7 people, 2 of them past 60 and 1 of them 15, were not going to finish it in time alone. "How many guns do you have?" I asked. 3 rifles, 2 shotguns, limited ammunition." "How many can shoot?" 5 of us, badly. "Renee, well." I looked at Renee. She was sitting at the end of the table, arms crossed, watching me the way she had probably once watched difficult dogs decide whether to bite. She had a sidearm on her hip that looked like it knew her. "Army?" I asked her. "Marines, a long time ago." I nodded. I drank the last of the goat's milk. I set the cup down carefully. "I'll bring my sister and my nephew here in the morning," I said. "She's a nurse, a good one. We have a rifle, ammunition, food we can contribute, a radio. We help you build the fence. We help you hold the line tomorrow. After that, we figure out what we are to each other." Ruth looked at Aaron again. Aaron looked at me. He took my 6 rounds out of his pocket and set them on the table in front of me, one by one, like coins being paid back. "Welcome to the farm, Daniel Reyes," he said. "I hope to God you're as decent as you sound, because I don't have the energy left to be wrong about you." I picked up the rounds. I picked up my rifle. I shook his hand. Then I walked back up the ridge to tell my sister that the small, hard, deliberate life I had glimpsed through binoculars was about to become ours, and that we were going to have to fight the day after tomorrow to keep it. Marisol did not argue with me when I told her. She listened. She asked 3 questions. How many? How armed? How sure was I that they were not the same as the men coming? When I had answered, she went into the back bedroom and woke Tomas and started packing our things into the duffel and 2 canvas bags, the way she did everything important, without theatrics, with her sleeves rolled up. "I don't like it," she said quietly while we worked. "I don't either. But you're right. I know. Don't gloat." "I'm not gloating, Marisol." "You were a little. Maybe a little." She allowed herself a smile, the first real one I had seen on her since the morning the phone rang. It was small and tired, and it lit the whole kitchen. We left the cabin at first light the next day. I locked the green door behind us. I put the key back under the kidney-shaped stone, because some part of me believed, against all evidence, that we would come back, and that my grandmother was still keeping the place. We walked the trail down the ridge in a single file, Marisol in front, Tomas in the middle, me at the rear with the rifle. Tomas carried his backpack of comics and the wooden cross and one of Doña Rosa's acorns in his pocket, which he had been saving for a reason he did not explain. The Yoder farm received us the way a body receives a transplant, with cautious, watchful tolerance. Ruth took Marisol immediately into the kitchen and began the long, quiet conversation that women who have run things their whole lives have when they meet each other. Within an hour, they were arguing about antibiotics. Within 2, they were laughing. Esther took Tomas out to meet the goats, which was the second luckiest thing that happened to him that month. The first being that he had been born to Marisol. Aaron and Daniel and I went out to the fence line with hammers and wire and the urgency of men who could count. We worked until dusk. We did not finish the fence. We did, however, build a sturdy choke point at the only vehicle approach to the farmyard. 2 staggered barriers of railroad ties and welded rebar that would force any truck to slow to a crawl and turn sideways to pass. Renee set up a firing position in the hayloft of the barn with a clean line down the approach. Aaron took the front porch. I took the corner of the milking shed, where I could cover the side yard and fall back into the house if I had to. Marisol took the cellar with Thomas and Esther and Samuel. with a medical kit and a shotgun, and Ruth's specific, unsentimental instruction that her job, if it came to it, was to keep the children alive at any cost, including the cost of not coming up. We ate together that night at the long wooden table. Ruth said grace in a low Pennsylvania Dutch I did not understand, and then in English for the rest of us. She thanked God for the food. She thanked God for the safe arrival of new friends. She asked God, with a directness I admired, to soften the hearts of the men who were coming, and if he could not soften them, to make them slow and stupid. Tomas giggled. I think it might have been the first time anyone had laughed at one of Ruth's prayers in a long time. She looked at him, and her face cracked into something young. After dinner, Marisol and I sat on the porch with Aaron and Ruth and Renee. We did not have bourbon. We had a clear corn liquor Aaron had made himself in a glass jar that tasted like motor oil and courage. We drank a small amount each. We did not talk strategy. We talked instead about who we had been. Aaron had wanted to be a veterinarian when he was young, but his father had needed him on the farm. Ruth had run away to Philadelphia at 19 and come back 2 years later, and she would not say why. And Aaron looked at her with such tenderness when she did not say why that I had to look away. Renee had a wife named Catherine in San Diego, who she had not been able to reach in 11 days. Marisol talked about Thomas's father, in the past tense for the first time, and I reached across and held her hand, and she let me. I told them about my grandmother's phone call. I had not planned to. It came out the way truths come out when you are tired and slightly drunk and surrounded by people who have already decided to trust you. I told them all of it, the static, her voice, the instructions, the letter under the stone, the dream on the 6th night. I waited for them to laugh, or to shift uncomfortably, or to politely change the subject. Ruth set down her jar. She looked at me steadily, with eyes that had seen more than I would ever know. My mother came to me the night before she died, Ruth said. She had been dead 7 hours. She stood at the foot of my bed and she told me I was going to have a daughter and I should name her Esther. I had been told by 3 doctors I could not have children. Esther was born 11 months later. Aaron nodded once, as if confirming a piece of family history he had heard before. There are more things in heaven and earth, Daniel Reyes, Ruth said, than are dreamt of in your dispatch logs. Your grandmother sounds like a woman who knew how to make a long-distance call. I would have liked to meet her. You would have, I said. She would have liked you too. We sat in the dark after that, the 5 of us, and we did not speak for a long time, and the stars came out over the Pennsylvania hills with the same indifference they had always had. And somewhere in the valley below us, headlights bloomed on the road and began, slowly, to climb. They came at 3:14 in the morning, which I knew because I had been staring at my watch for 20 minutes. They came with their headlights off, which they had not done the first time, and which told us everything we needed to know about what kind of negotiation they had come for. 2 pickups. I counted 6 silhouettes by starlight. They stopped 100 yards short of the choke point. They sat. They were listening. They were trying to decide if we were sleeping. We were not sleeping. We had not slept since dusk. We had been at our positions for 6 hours, taking turns drinking water and chewing jerky and not speaking. Aaron had given me a hand signal at midnight. 2 fingers tapped against his temple, which meant breathe slow, think slow. I had been trying. Renee fired the first shot. She did not aim to kill. She aimed at the left front tire of the lead truck and she hit it at 100 yards in the dark with a single round, and the tire let go with a sound like a slap. 3 of the silhouettes dropped immediately to the road. Professional. 3 did not, and one of the 3 who did not began to swing a long weapon up toward the hayloft. And Aaron fired from the porch, and the silhouette went down and did not move again. After that, it was noise and muzzle flash and the smell of cordite and the very specific terror of being shot at, which is different from any other terror because it has a sound, the sound of air being torn open very close to your head. I fired 4 rounds from the corner of the milking shed at shapes that moved against the hood of the second truck. I do not know if I hit anything. I do not know if I killed anyone that night. I have made peace with not knowing mostly. It was over in under 3 minutes. 3 of them were dead in the road. 2 of them ran into the woods on foot and did not come back. The 6th was wounded and on his knees in the gravel with his hands raised, and Aaron walked down to him with his rifle leveled, and Ruth walked down behind Aaron with a lantern. And they spoke to the man for a long time, and we could not hear what was said. In the end, Aaron did not kill him. He took his weapons, he took his boots. He pointed down the road. The man limped away into the dark and was gone. "We don't kill what we don't have to," Aaron said when he came back up the porch steps. "Even now, especially now, or we won't recognize ourselves on the other side of this." Renee came down from the hayloft. Her hands were not shaking. She nodded at Aaron. She walked past him into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water and drank it standing up. I saw her wipe her face once with the back of her wrist, and I understood that she had killed before, and that she had her own way of carrying it, and that the way did not invite questions. We did not sleep that night. We dragged the 3 bodies away from the choke point and laid them in the field behind the barn, covered with tarps, because Ruth said we would bury them in the morning. And Ruth's word on such matters was law. We patched the lead truck's tire with a plug kit and rolled both vehicles into the barn. We checked the trucks for supplies. They had food, ammunition, fuel, and a duffel bag with 3 women's wedding rings in it, the gold dulled with handling. And that was the moment I understood completely what kind of men had come and what kind of negotiation they had been planning. Marisol came up from the cellar at dawn with Tomas asleep in her arms. He had slept through the whole thing, she said, with the cross still in his hand. Esther came up behind her, pale, dry-eyed, holding the shotgun by the barrel like a tool she had finished using. Ruth took the shotgun from her gently and set it on the table. She put a hand on Esther's cheek. Esther leaned into it for a long moment, and then walked outside and stood in the yard with her face turned up to the lightening sky. And she did not cry, and I understood that she had become, overnight, a different person than the girl who had brought Thomas to meet the goats, and that this was a thing that was happening now, to all the children everywhere, and that none of us had been given any choice about it. We buried the 3 men that morning, behind the barn, in graves Aaron and I dug, while Ruth read from a small black Bible she had carried out from the kitchen. She did not know their names. She prayed for them anyway. She prayed for their mothers. She prayed for the women whose rings had been in the bag. She prayed for us, the diggers, that we would not be required to dig more graves than our souls could hold. When she was finished, she closed the Bible, and she looked at me, and she said, "You'll learn the prayer, Daniel, sooner than you'd like. Everyone here learns it eventually." I nodded. I went back to the house. I sat on the porch with Thomas on my lap, and I watched the sun come up over the Pennsylvania hills. And I tried to remember what my grandmother had said about God taking the long way around. And for the first time since her voice had come out of the static in her empty apartment, I was not sure I believed it. But I held my nephew, and I rocked him slowly. And I tried. October became November. November became December. The farm became, against every reasonable expectation, a home. We finished the fence on the second week. We dug a second well on the third. Marisol set up a small infirmary in the front parlor and treated Aaron's bad shoulder and Samuel's diabetes with insulin. Renee scavenged on a careful run to an abandoned vet clinic in Jim Thorpe. Renee went on those runs alone, usually with my rifle and her sidearm. And she came back with antibiotics, fuel, batteries, seed, twice with a stray dog, once with a girl of about 7 who had been hiding alone in a basement for 9 days, and who would not speak for the first month, and whose name, when she finally gave it, was Lucia. Ruth absorbed Lucia into the household the way water absorbs into dry earth without commentary. The infected dwindled in our valley, slowly, as the weather turned. The cold made them slower. Hunger made them slower still. We did not see herds, only stragglers, 2 or 3 a week, drifting along the road below the farm. We dealt with them with the small, efficient violence that becomes possible when you have practiced. We did not enjoy it. We did not avoid it. We treated it the way Aaron treated the slaughtering of pigs, with a brief acknowledgement and a clean cut. The radio woman in Scranton went off the air on November 9th. We listened for her every evening for 2 weeks afterward, and she did not come back. We did not say her name when we turned the radio off. We did not have to. Other voices took her place slowly. A man in Williamsport, a woman in Binghamton, a group of college students broadcasting from a basement in State College, who played music between the lists of names. We started a list of our own. Aaron wrote it in a ledger in the kitchen drawer. Every person who had come through the farm, every person we had heard about from passing strangers, every person we had lost. The list grew. It also, sometimes, subtracted, because some of the names we had listed as missing came back, walked up the road in boots that did not fit them, and were folded into the household by Ruth without ceremony. Tomas turned 10 in early December. We had no cake. Marisol made him a small loaf of sweet bread with the last of our raisins, and we sang to him at the long wooden table by candlelight. 10 voices, including Lucia's, who had started to speak in October and who, by December, would not stop. Tomas cried at the song. He cried, he said, because he had thought, on the day the phone rang, that he would never have a birthday again. We let him cry. We did not try to talk him out of it. Then he blew out the single candle Ruth had set in the bread, and he made a wish, and he would not tell us what it was. And I suspect I know. I dreamed of my grandmother 3 more times that fall. Always on the porch, always in the rocker, always silent, nodding once, the same way. The 4th time I dreamed of her, the morning after Thomas's birthday, she was not on the porch. She was standing in the yard, looking up at me in the loft window. And she was smiling. The small private smile she had used when she was about to leave a room. She raised one hand. She waved. Then she turned and walked across the yard and into the trees. And she did not look back. And I understood in the dream that this was the last time. I woke up at dawn with my face wet and the calm certainty that she had finished her errand. The favor God had been slow to grant had finally, quietly, been granted. The line was closed. I told no one about that dream. Some things you carry alone, not because they are too heavy, but because they are too precious to share. I sat on the porch that morning with a cup of coffee. Real coffee, brewed from beans Renee had brought back from a raid the week before. And I watched the trees where she had gone, and I thanked her, out loud, one more time. The wind moved through the pines. A chipmunk, possibly Greg, ran across the porch rail and did not stop to negotiate. The world, which had ended, continued. The men in the second group came in January, and they were not like the first group at all, and that turned out to be the more dangerous thing. They came on foot, in daylight, in clean uniforms with patches on the shoulders that read Civil Restoration Authority, which was not a name any of us had heard on any radio. 4 of them, 3 men and a woman, all armed but with their weapons holstered, all polite, all carrying clipboards. They stopped at the choke point. They did not try to enter. They waited until Aaron came down to meet them. They introduced themselves with first names and titles I did not believe. They said they were conducting a census of survivors in the Pocono region. They said they represented a provisional government coalition based out of Harrisburg. They said they wanted to count us, to register us, to bring us under the protection of an emerging civil order. Aaron listened. He nodded. He asked them a question. Whose protection, exactly? The woman with the clipboard smiled. A coalition of federal, state, and private partners. We're in the early stages. We need your patience while we build. Private partners, Aaron said. Yes. And what do we owe these private partners for this protection? She did not stop smiling. A small percentage of agricultural output, a registry of able-bodied adults for potential labor allocation. Voluntary, of course. For now. Aaron looked at her. He looked at the patches on their shoulders. He looked at the boots they were wearing, which were good boots, not military, not police. The kind of boots that get issued to private security contractors. He looked at me, standing 30 feet behind him with the marlin held loose at my side. He looked back at the woman. I'll need to discuss it with my family, he said. Come back in a week. We'll have an answer. That's very reasonable, she said. Thank you for your time, Mr. Yoder. I had not told her his name. He had not told her his name. None of us had. They left. We watched them walk back down the road until they disappeared around the bend. Aaron did not move for a full minute. Then he turned to me. His face had a quality I had not seen on it before. A kind of cold, tired sorrow. They were never going to come ask us nicely twice, he said. They came to count, to map, to see what we had. I know. Get Ruth, get Marisol, get Renee. We meet in the kitchen in 5 minutes. We met. We talked for 3 hours. We did not raise our voices. We did not panic. We discussed, with a kind of slow, grave realism that the farm had taught us, what our options were. Stay and resist when they came back in force. Stay and submit, and become a node in whatever system was being built. Leave and find higher ground and start over. Ruth spoke last, as she always did. She had been quiet for most of the discussion, her hands folded around a coffee cup. This farm, she said, is not my home because of its walls. It is my home because of the people in it. If we have to leave the walls to keep the people, we leave the walls. I would rather build new walls with my family alive than die defending old ones. Aaron put his hand over hers. He nodded. We have 5 days, maybe 6, before they come back, Renee said. We can move 20 miles north on foot in 3 days. There's a state game lands tract above Lake Harmony I scouted in October. Defensible terrain, water, no road access. We can disappear into it. We winter there. We come down in spring and see what the world has become. I thought of the map my grandmother had drawn. Lake Harmony. She had marked the trail. She had marked it months before any of this. I closed my eyes for a moment. I did not say anything about it. I did not need to. All in favor, Aaron said. Every hand went up, including Esther's, including Tomas's. who was not strictly part of the vote, but who had taken to raising his hand at family meetings, and whose vote no one had ever had the heart to discount. We began packing the next morning. We worked in silence, mostly, with the focused calm of people who had already grieved a loss they had not yet incurred. I went up to the loft of the cabin one last time, in my mind, and I said goodbye to the rifle's hiding place, and to the third floorboard from the window, and to the green door, and to the kidney-shaped stone. Then I came down. There was work to do, and I had been raised by a woman who had seen more than one world end, not to keep grief waiting when there was work. We left the Yoder farm on the morning of January 19th, 11 of us on foot, with 2 pull sleds of supplies and 1 nervous dog and 1 quiet girl named Lucia, holding my nephew's hand the entire way. The snow was deep but not impassable. The sky was that high, cold blue that only happens in January, the kind of blue that does not promise anything but does not deny anything either. Aaron led. Renee took the rear. Marisol and Ruth walked in the middle with the children. Samuel, who had still not spoken in all the months I had known him, walked beside me, and at one point, near a frozen creek where we stopped to rest, he turned to me and said, in a perfectly clear voice, "Your grandmother was right about you." And then he went back to his silence, and I did not ask, because the gift was complete as given. We reached the game lands tract on the 3rd day, just before sundown. It was as Renee had described it. A high ridge above a small frozen lake, a stand of old hemlock that broke the wind, the foundations of a CCC-era ranger station that we could build out before the worst of February hit. We set up camp in the half-light. We built a fire. We ate the last of Ruth's bread and the first of our new venison, taken that afternoon by Renee with a single shot at a doe that had stopped to watch us cross her meadow. That night, around the fire, Tomas asked me to tell the story. "What story, mijo?" "The one about Abuela's phone call, from the beginning, with everything." I looked around the fire. Marisol nodded. Ruth nodded. Aaron, who had heard it before, leaned back against a log and folded his hands. Lucia, who had heard it never, opened her eyes very wide. Renee stoked the fire with a long stick and did not look at me, which was her way of giving permission. So I told it, from the call at 4:17 in the morning, through the voice on the line at 10:43, through the drive north, through the bridge at La Heighton, and the man with the rifle and the green door and the letter under the stone and the dream of my grandmother in the rocker and her last wave from the yard. I told it slowly, in order, without flourish. I did not embellish. I did not need to. The fire crackled. The hemlocks moved in the wind above us. Tomas leaned against my arm and did not interrupt. When I was finished, no one spoke for a long time. Then Lucia, in her small new voice, said, "My grandma didn't call me. Do you think she wanted to?" I looked at her. I thought about my grandmother. I thought about Ruth's mother. I thought about all the women who had ever stood at the foot of a bed in the small hours of a morning that was not technically theirs anymore. "I think she did, mijita," I said. "I think she's been trying. I think sometimes the line is just slow. I think she would want you to know that you are not alone, even when you feel like you are. I think she would tell you to be brave and to listen to the people who love you. And I think she would tell you that the world is not ending. It is just taking the long way around." Lucia nodded, very serious. She leaned against Marisol's other arm. The fire crackled. Somewhere down the valley, a long way off, a single owl called, and was answered by another owl. And we sat in the small ring of light we had made on a ridge above a frozen lake in a world that had been remade against our will. And we were, for that moment, complete. I sat up after the others had gone to sleep. I watched the fire die down to embers. I thought about the call. I thought about all the impossible things that had become, slowly, ordinary. I took my grandmother's wooden cross from my pocket. I held it in the firelight. I did not pray. I had never been good at praying. I only said, very quietly, into the dark, above the embers, the same 3 words she had said to me on the line that morning. The 3 words she had said to me every night of my childhood when she tucked me into bed. The 3 words that were, when you stripped everything else away, the only message any of us had ever been trying to send across any distance at all. I love you. The wind moved through the hemlocks. The embers shifted. Somewhere I felt, very faintly, the line connect. It is March now. The lake has begun to thaw at the edges. Lucia has stopped flinching at loud sounds. Tomas has grown an inch and lost another tooth and learned how to set a snare. Marisol smiles more often than she used to, though her eyes still go somewhere else when she thinks no one is watching. Ruth is teaching me the prayer, the long one, in Pennsylvania Dutch. And I'm learning it badly, and she does not mind. I do not know what is coming. None of us do. The radio voices have grown fewer. The world below us has not yet decided what shape it will take, and we have not yet decided what shape we will take inside it. But I know this. My grandmother called me 6 hours after she died, and she told me to run, and I ran, and because I ran, 11 people are alive on a ridge above a thawing lake. And one of them is a child she never met named Lucia, who has begun to laugh again at small things. That is the only theology I have left. It is enough. I am not the man who answered the phone that morning. That man could not have done what I have done. He could not have buried what I have buried, or carried what I have carried, or loved what I have loved across this much distance. He was a smaller man, and I miss him sometimes, the way you miss a coat you have outgrown. Abuela, if the line is still open, I hear you. I am still listening. Te amo, always.